Hello, my name is Josephine LoRe, and I'm coming to you for April, which is the International Poetry Month, from Calgary, Alberta. And where I currently live is the ancestral and traditional lands of numerous Indigenous peoples who lived and traversed through this area, the Piikani, Kainai, Tsuut'ina, Siksika, Nakota. I'd like to acknowledge them and thank them for having first brought language, culture, and poetry to this land. And they no longer live in their traditional ways on this land, and I'd like maybe to acknowledge that we should keep that in mind as well as I read this poem called A Single Leaf. This poem is a leaf falling from a tree. This poem is a stillness after the last echo sounds, the pause between an exhalation and the next inhale. This poem is gravel embedded into knee, an offering of thanks for a crust of week-old bread. This poem is the rumble of armored trucks, a deluge of debris. This poem is every story, every footfall, walking further from belongings, step by step toward the safety beyond borders. This poem is a pacifier in the dead grasses by the roadside, family photos curling in the flame. This poem is fingers playing a white piano for the very last time, a baker in a land of foreign tongues. This poem is centuries of steady leaving, flaxen-haired children playing in the grasses of the Canadian West, hearing tales of their babushka. This poem is the pattern finally painted on a Pascal egg, a ribbon woven, a dance steeped in folklore. This poem is empty words and hollow lies. This poem is arrogance, the hubris of ambition, a heart of anthracite. This poem is despotic, the color of blue sky, golden sun, a tattered flag at dusk. This poem is the world watching, too afraid to condemn, the pause between an inhalation and the next, and the last exhale. This poem is a silence that thunders after the last echo. This poem, a single leaf falling from a tree. This poem is a doll, trampled, a fountain, withered, markings for growth penciled on a door jamb of a house in which the roof has fallen in. This poem is a whimper in the night. This poem is Syria, Passchendaele, Dakar. This poem is Dresden, Tripoli, Ukraine. This poem is polished leather marching in the mud to the counterpoint of hatred. This poem is a drone, the barrel of a gun. This poem is a daffodil sprung from ground, no one there to marvel. This poem is a prayer unanswered in the dark, a graveyard, headstones tumbled in the tumult. This poem is hope, navigating in a blind sky. This poem is fear, the stench of death, a seed swallowed in the belly of the plenty. This poem is numb. This poem is sirens, air raids, blackouts, a mother shushing a wailing child, eyes dimmed by the hunger and the horror. This poem is robin muted, barn owl stunned into silence. This poem is humanitarian, drop by single drop, the cold press of metal. This poem is making its way over rubble, the body yearning for comfort, for respite, for home. And this poem is the blue glow of late night news, the drone, the drone. This poem is Gallipoli, the Battle of Batoche, Beirut, Leningrad, Michilimackinac, Sarajevo, Kiev. This poem is a weightless child born on weary shoulders. the elderly, infirm, left behind. This poem is the same mistake repeated. Power, greed, and lust, all the venial sins and all the mortal sins combined, and circles, circles upon circles of inner hell. This poem is the atrocities of man, barriers, fences, roadblocks, undiluted hate. This poem is a cry tearing the veil of night. This poem is a leaf, a single leaf falling from a single tree. This poem is a stream turning red, bodies rotting into ground. This poem is letters undelivered, lovers lost to each other in forever, babies not conceived and never born. This poem is fields untilled, unsown, song unsung, country churches, windows smashed and broken. This poem is chickens left to rummage, cows unmilked, sheep unshorn, a horse dying of starvation on cold ground. This poem is the moon hung low in desperation, the deportation of Acadians at the point of bayonet. Tibet, Jerusalem, Berlin, their walls of wailing, walls of brick, the floating exodus of Vietnam. This poem is Mogadishu, Rwanda, the lost boys of Sudan. This poem is drownings in the harbor, the Noche Triste, the Fourth Reich. This poem is the West Bank and the Nile, the War of 1812, the War of Secession, the War against repression, the War against concession. This poem is a reed basket, Daniel and the lion, Samson shorn. This poem is David without a slingshot or a stone. This poem is a leaf, a single leaf falling from a tree, a single tree floating on a river turning red. Thank you very much. And I guess the message is dual. Prayers of solidarity and hope for the Ukraine, and also a way to celebrate Poetry Month. Thank you again.